Human nature. The most basic question in philosophy is, what kind of being am I? The answer to this question about human nature will affect how you see others and how you live. Physiologists have considered the question of whether humans are self-interested or whether unselfish considerations can motivate. Sigmund Freud, for example, held that humans are essentially selfish and aggressive, a view that was also endorsed earlier by the English philosopher Thomas Hobbes. This view was also endorsed by Mark Mercer, who argued for physiological egoism and the theory that humans can only act out of self-interest. Mercer claims that introspection reveals that humans always act intentionally to benefit themselves. If you believe that humans are self-interested, this will affect how you interact with others. It will also affect how you think society should be organized. Would a self-interested society be better arranged along socialist or capitalist lines, for example, and it would affect how you interact with the universe? If people are material beings only, then you might think that death is at the end of existence. If you do not believe this, then you might think that the material universe is a preparation for spiritual life in another world and universe. What is human nature? Many people believe that there is a life after death. Such accounts ask us to make some fundamental assumptions first. They ask to assume that human beings have a self second. They ask us to assume that this self is different in form of the body. This is traditional Western view of human nature, and not everyone accepts it. The rationalistic version of the traditional Western view of human nature. The most influential version of the tradition view sees humans primarily as thinkers capable of reasoning. This view is represented in the work of Plato, who believed that humans consisted of appetite, reason, and spirited element. Reason seeks what is good and right. The spirited element seeks to assert itself, and appetite involves desires. For Plato, the purpose and destiny of the soul is to be free of its body and ascend to heaven, where it will be united with forms. Freud, Hobbes, and Mercer. Humans can control their appetite and forms eternal and perfect ideals that exist in an unchanging heavenly world. For Plato, as opposed to Freud, Hobbes, Mercer, humans can control their appetites and their aggression through the use of reason. They are not ruled by self-interested desires, but the ability to exercise control in this way depends on one's past choices. If a person gives into his non-rational nature, he will lose the ability to control it. For Aristotle, too, the reason was also the highest power of humans. Although while Plato held that the truth about human nature involved knowledge of another world or only reason could apprehend, Aristotle held it only required knowledge of this world. The human purpose. Aristotle emphasized that the humans have a purpose, as do all living things. For Aristotle, as Plato, the use of reasons is purpose of human nature. The immaterial and immortal soul. Plato, but not Aristotle, emphasized the spiritual aspect of human nature in the dialogue De Phaedo. Socrates argued that the self, the soul, is immaterial and so is immortal. This is because Plato held we are engaged in the activity of knowing the form, something that physical body cannot carry on. Implications of the traditional rationalistic view. Aristotle claimed that if one group of persons was less rational than another, they would be less than human and could justifiably be enslaved by those who were more rational. If so, could it? Any form of explosion be justified on these grounds? So this view has significant implications. It has also influenced another version of traditional view, the Judeo-Christian view of human nature. The Judeo-Christian version of the traditional Western view of human nature. According to the Christian tradition, humans are made in the image of God. The abilities to love and to know, will, and intellect are defining characteristics of humans in the Judeo-Christian view. These are open to all regardless of their level of rationality. For the Christian, the way to union with God is through emulating Jesus of Nazareth, in whom we find expression of the highest virtue. This view also fosters the idea of moral self that can choose good or evil. This view is not, though, a denial of the rationalistic view. Indeed, the early Christian Saint Augustine agreed with the humans have an immaterial, and immortal soul, and that soul is rational, but he maintained that humans could not overcome tendencies to evil without the help of God, and he also emphasized the nature of the will, which is our ability to choose between good or evil. The Christian view also agrees with the classical view that humans have a purpose. In the modern world, the rational and Christian views of the self have been challenged, especially by the science of philosophy and evolution. Charles Darwin purposed 3 key ideas. 1. That animals and plants are sometimes born by chance with features that are different from those of their parents that can be passed on to their offspring. And that 2, because animals produce more offspring than can survive, they must continuously compete with each other to stay alive. Finally, Darwin argued for survival of the fittest, the notion that the random variations that an animal is born with can give it an advantage in the struggle for survival. Animals with such variations are likely to pass them along to their offspring, while those without them are weeded out. This process can make animals gradually change into new species. This also applies to humans, who must have to evolve. This led to disturbing realization that humans have not always been as they are. Implications for the traditional view. Darwin's view has 2 implications. First, they imply that humans are animals and that the human ability to reason evolved the capacities among non-human animals. Second, they undercut the view that humans are designed and have a purpose. Darwin's evidence. Darwin's theory, as contrasted with the notion that each species had been independently created by God, is supported by a number of forms of evidence. First, it explains why species can be classified into different groups that share common characteristics, namely because they evolved from common ancestors. Second, it explains why species are geographically distributed over the earth. Third, bodily characteristics such as structures and shapes are best explained by evolution. Finally, the existence of the fossil record provides especially strong support for Darwin's theory. In sum, Darwin argues that his theory provides the best explanation for a number of distinct facts. Response to Darwin. Many have responded to Darwin, most controversially. Some have argued in his theory lacks definitive proof, and there is fossil evidence that is inconsistent with Darwin's evolution. Third, some attacks his claim that there is fundamental difference between the cognitive abilities of humans and non-human animals. The existentialist challenge. Existentialism holds that humans are whatever they make themselves to be. For Jean-Paul Sartre, humans are condemned to be free. They cannot rely on God, for he does not exist, nor on society to justify their actions. The consciousness of this freedom causes anguish The most anguishing thought of all is that we are responsible for ourselves. When we claim that something internal to us is the cause of what we are, we act in bad faith, which occurs when we pretend that we are not free. This provides a profound challenge to the traditional view. If it is correct, there is no such thing as universal human nature. The feminist challenge. Many feminists challenge that the traditional view of human nature is sexist. It discriminates against women. Plato assumed that the sole reason should rule over the body and its desires and emotions. Although Plato thought that men and women were more or less equal, his student Aristotle claimed the women do not share fully in reason. The view that women are subordinate to men was echoed by Augustine. Can we think differently? Are sexist views that assume the inferiority of women to men essential to the traditional view of human nature? Perhaps we should simply throw out the rationalistic view of human nature if it is sexist. Genevieve Lloyd argues that this is not as easy as it might appear. If we say that women have just as much reason as men, this would be to imply that reason, the male trait, is superior. If so, it is possible for us to reject the rationalistic view of human nature altogether. The mind-body problem. How do mind and body relate? To most of us, it is obvious that we have a mind and a body, but the mind's subjective consciousness is puzzling. Moreover, those who accept that the mind and body are distinct are faced with a problem. How can a non-physical object interact with a physical one? Other people hold that only the physical exists. The dualist view of human nature: you are immaterial mind with a material body. Rene Descartes held the mind and the body were distinct. Since we can conceive of the mind existing without the body, on the view of humans are made up of two substances. But this view faces the problem of how immaterial mind can move a physical body, and how can a physical body affect the immaterial mind. Descartes held that since mind and body obviously interact, there must be a point of contact between them, the pineal gland. Not everyone accepts this. Gottfried Leibniz that the mind and the body don't really interact at all, but only appear to, while Malebranche held that God synchronizes the apparent interaction. The material view of human nature: you are physical body. You are your physical body. Hobbes noted that the problem with dualism was that it held that there are two things in human nature. But let us say that there is only one, the material body. The operations of mind will then be explained in terms of the workings of the body. This view, processes such as thought and life are just physical or chemical processes, is often called reductionism. The idea that we can completely understand one kind of reality in terms of another kind. It is, however, not clear how physical phenomena can produce mental phenomena. The mind-brain identity theory of human nature: the mind is your brain. One kind of contemporary materialist view is the identity theory of the mind. The states of consciousness are identical with states of the brain. This view is held by J.J.C. Smart, but might run into problems quickly. Brain states are publicly observable, but mental states are not. Moreover, a mental experience has no location, no color, and no shape. So how can a brain states and conscious states be the same, since they are such very different things? The behaviorist view of human nature, your mind is how you behave. Behaviorism is the view of mental activities can be explained in terms of behavior. For example, Gilbert Ryle had the mental activities could be explained in terms of the activities that are associated with, thus to say that John knows that a chair is near is to say that he will behave in certain ways, such as sitting in it. But Hilary Putnam has argued that it is easy to come up with examples that show that behaviorism is wrong, such as when one acts as though one is in pain. One is not actually in pain, despite showing the appropriate behavior. The functionalist view of human nature, your mind is like a computer. Another view of human nature is functionalism. This holds that we should explain mental activities and mental states as mediating between perceptual inputs and behavioral outputs. Mental states and activities refer only to the functions they serve in process that connect our sensory inputs to our behavioral outputs. Functionalism allows that mental states can explain other mental states. A person's intentions, for example, can be explained in terms of her desires and beliefs. The intention is then something that plays the role of linking the sensory stimulation to the desire to perform a certain action in light of it. But the functionalist seems to leave something out: the inner conscious states that we are aware of. Functionalism has led some philosophers to believe that human brain is kind of a computer. Some have also argued that when computers can process inputs and outputs like the human brain does, they will be able to think. Alan Turing held that if a computer was so powerful that we could not tell the difference between its answers and those of a human being, the computer has a mind. John Searle opposes the view of human nature using his Chinese room thought experiment. He argues that computers lack consciousness, but Searle is not a dualist. He believes that humans are merely physical creatures, although the mental state that the physical states produce are not reducible to physical things. Element materialism. You have no mind. Many philosophers believe that only matter exists. Given the difficulties faced by monistic views outlined here, elementive materialists hold that we should eliminate our beliefs in the existence of consciousness and mental states. These fictional realities, like the demons we use to think, cause some mental disorders and have no place in science of mind/brain. The new dualism, the mind has non-physical properties. New dualists hold not that there are two different kinds of substances in the universe, but there are two different kinds of properties. These dualists hold that consciousness is not a physical feature of the world, but a non-material property of it. There is an enduring self. The traditional Western view assumes that you are the same person today as you were earlier in your life. It assumes that humans ourselves endure through time. But we also sometimes say that a person has changed over time. If, for example, her personality changed as a result of brain damage or suffers the Alzheimer's disease. But even aside from such cases, we need to know how it is that we can say that we are the same person throughout life. This is the problem of personal identity. Maybe what makes you the same person across the time is the persistence of your body. But if this is the case, we could never become the new persons as a result of the brain or injury. Moreover, if this isn't what important, then you could not survive your death. Finally, if brains were transplanted between people, wouldn't we want to say that the brain and not the body carried the self? The soul of enduring self. The traditional Western views holds that in each living human body is a soul. This is me. Descartes held this view, holding that it was continually of his thinking and mind that made him remain the same person, as often as he exists. But how do we know that a person's mind continues to be the same over time? Consciousness as the source of enduring self. John Locke held that Descartes was mistaken, for if one soul migrated to another body and lost the memories that it formerly had, we would not say to the person whose soul it was continued to exist. From this, Locke concludes that what makes a person endure over time is memory. But in response to this, Thomas Reid argued that Locke viewed produced contradictions. For example, Tom at age 20 remembers being Tom at age 10, and so is the same person. Tom at age 30 remembers being Tom at age 20, but not being Tom at age 10. Thus, Tom at age 30 is both the same person as the person who was Tom at age 10. This is not the same person who was Tom at age 10. Also, what if I cannot remember everything that I did? The no-self view. Some view of human nature deny the existence of self. Central to Buddhist thought is the idea that all things composite and transcend, and so nothing abides permanently as an individual. The self, like everything else, is in a constant state of flux and disintegration. It is transcendent as a permanent entity, then the self does not exist. David Hume had a very similar view. He held that we cannot claim that there is an inner self because all we experience is a constant stream of sensations and no determinate self. These views do have problems, for it is not clear why we should be concerned with our future interests if they are correct. We are independent and self-sufficient individuals. It seems obvious that parents should teach their children to be independent and self-sufficient, and some conformity. People should also be true to themselves and be free to live their own lives. The atomistic self. These views are all based on the view of self as atomistic, independent of others, and self-sufficient. For Descartes, for example, the real me is interior and exists independently of others. Similarly, Kant held that the core of the real self is the ability to choose the moral laws and moral principles by which one should live one's life. The relation self. Charles Taylor suggests that there is another way of viewing the self. That who I am depends on my relationships. I need others to define who I am. Aristotle also claimed that humans are social animals, while Hegel argued that I cannot be who I am apart from my relationships to others. A free and independent person is one who can choose what course his life will take, and we cannot develop this capacity unless others recognize and affirm our self-mastery. Power and Hegel. The key idea of Hegel is that who you are ultimately depends on relationships with others. The implications of this are profound, that we create strong and weak persons, for example, by the qualities we are willing to recognize in others. Thus, being powerful and powerless is the function of relationships with others. Culture and self-identity. Other persons has culture. Hegel argued that the person's culture is the mirror through which society shows the person who and what she is. Thus, there is no real me outside of the cultural context where I am situated. Search for the real self. Who is right, then? On the one hand, we seem to be only what others make us. On the other hand, we seem to be independent selves with basic qualities that we are born with. Which are we? The choice here is important.